Well, let me tell you something, brothers! Hulk Hogan may be a weird, problematic, hot dog skinned relic and someone very easy to take the piss out of, dude, but the man was one of the best characters and biggest draws in wrestling history. Nobody generated as much of the green stuff for as long as the Hulkster did, as fans would routinely cough up to see what terrible Terry was getting up to on pay-per-view, where the biggest matches invariably happened. Often, those same fans were left massively disappointed, because Hogan had some right stinkers on order-only events in the past, of which these are the stinkiest. I'm Adam Pacitti from Cultaholic Wrestling, and these are the 10 worst Hulk Hogan pay-per-view matches ever. Join us! Number 10 versus Roddy Piper at Judgment Day 2003. One of Hogan's main rivals during the rock and wrestling boom of the 80s was Roddy Piper, the two men producing great television and generating impressive business at the box office when put against one another. Their encounters were legendary, and the feud was so strong and memorable that it's really no surprise that WCW rehashed it in the late 90s. The matches weren't great, to put it mildly, but the pay-per-view buy rates were certainly encouraging. Fast forward a little, and the well may have been well and truly dry after, but that didn't stop WWE trying desperately to find water in 2003. The Rowdy Scott returned to the company and got involved in Hogan's feud with Mr. McMahon, setting up a bout between Piper and Mr. America, Hogan's wink-wink nudge-nudge masked alter ego at Judgment Day. Though the blow-off only lasted for a shade under 5 minutes, it still managed to be slow, boring, and actually quite sad, with one of the highlights being the old lads smacking each other with weightlifting belts. Adding to the weirdness of it all was the presence of Sean O'Haire and Zach Gowen at ringside, who looked on as Hogan scored the predictable pin after the leg drop of doom. Number 9 versus Triple H at Backlash 2002. Hogan played an absolute blinder at WrestleMania 18, turning himself babyface in his match against The Rock while being cheered on frantically by 68,000 in the Toronto Sky Dome, despite supposedly being the heel leader of the NWO. Nostalgia was in, brother, and very soon it was goodbye to the black and white and hello once again to the red and yellow. Hogan became the challenger for the undisputed title and booked against new champion Triple H in the main event of Backlash. The old babyface clash used enough tricks in the early going to fool the audience into thinking they might be witnessing something half decent, but it soon came undone. A major chunk of the 20-minute snoozer was the game working the leg, or otherwise trying to retain with a sleeper. I mean, it would have been nice if somebody had told these lads that it was 2002, not 1972. Anyway, Hulk won, after he did his usual, seemingly in slow motion, before the ref bump and run-in parade. The two men shook hands after, but you have to think that Hunter was seething inside after having his thunder stolen by another master politician. Number 8 versus The Butcher at STARRCADE 1994. It must be great being Hogan's mate. Well, I mean, apart from having to spend any amount of time with him, but still. The perks are there for all to see, as Hulk routinely got his pals cushy gigs in whatever company he worked for, especially in the gravy train that was Ted Turner's WCW, where Hogan was the top dog and WCW champion in 1994. So who would Hulk square off with at STARRCADE, the biggest show of the year? Vader? Sting? Randy Savage? All good suggestions, but not quite as appealing as Ed friggin' Leslie. Yes, the perennial hanger-oner wormed his way into the marquee main event match, working as the Butcher against his drinking and tanning buddy. Naturally, the pair of them didn't bother actually putting the work in, half-arsing their way through a match full of choking, slapping, biting, raking, and, well, just about anything else that didn't result in some sort of actual impact. Hogan won, of course, but really, at the end of the day, anyone involved in this mess was a loser. Number 7 versus The Rock at No Way Out 2003. After the Great One and the Immortal One stole the show at WrestleMania 18, a rematch was inevitable. WWE booked the sequel at No Way Out 2003, with Hogan back in the fold after a little I don't want to do any more jobs Vince vacation, while The Rock was doing some of the best work of his career as the arrogant heel with a foot planted firmly in Hollywood. It was obvious early on that the two superstars wouldn't be able to duplicate the magic from the year prior. The Brahma Bull was entertaining in his attempts to poke fun at his opponents, but the meat heat of the match was weak, and Hogan looked significantly more knackered than he had done the year prior. The screwjob replica finish also didn't leave a good taste in the mouth with either audiences at home or those watching in Montreal that night. The Rock tried, bless him, putting in quite the shift and attempting to get the match over on sheer willpower alone, but it was an uphill battle and lightning did not strike twice. Number 6 versus the Giant at Halloween Havoc 1995. Alright, so there's a lot going on here. First of all, this was the Giant's first proper match, like ever. Second, he was being billed as the son of the late great Andre the Giant. Third, the actual contest in the ring was preceded by a monster sumo truck match, which ended with the Giant falling off the side of Philadelphia's Cobo Hall, presumably to his death. And just look at the state of Hogan here. Clean shaven, paint on his head, and maroon cowboy boots. Your dad looked more respectable when he went through his midlife crisis. The bout was rudimentary, as it needed to be given Paul White's non-existent experience, and somehow managed to avoid being a complete and utter train wreck. And that is about as high a compliment as can be offered here, because it was not something that had any business headlining a pay-per-view. Worst of all was the post-match scene, with a crappy disqualification finish that turned screwy the next night on Nitro, as well as run-ins from Kevin Sullivan, Lex Luger, and Randy Savage, with the total package turning on the Macho Man to make things even more complicated. And props to me, because I didn't even mention the Yeti shagging Hogan into submission. Number 5 versus Sting at STARRCADE 1997. One of the great storylines during a banner 1997 was Hogan's feud with Sting, who had gone all moody and opted to sit in the rafters and rappel down from time to time rather than actually wrestle. The tension between Sting and the New World Order and its leader grew and grew over the course of the year, culminating in the main event of STARRCADE. The match should have been an epic and the result a total no-brainer, but the reality was far from it. It was a massive disappointment on all fronts, with a finish that ranks as one of the worst ever. Evil referee Nick Patrick was supposed to deliver a fast count and screw Sting over, only for Bret Hart to come out and get the match restarted. Then Sting would win with the Scorpion Deathlock. Only Patrick did a perfectly normal count, so the restart didn't make any sense as the Stinger fell victim to very real backstage politics, his big moment ruined. Hulk won the title back sharpish anyway, and Sting never really fully recovered from the whole episode, which is one of the moments you can pinpoint as the start of WCW's slow demise. Number 4 versus The Undertaker at Judgment Day 2002. After Hogan had dethroned Triple H for the undisputed title at Backlash, WWE hoped they could ride a red and yellow wave in the ratings and that Hulkster's Indian Summer would result in some big pay-per-view buy rates too. That didn't quite happen, however, and WWE decided to take the title from him in his first major pay-per-view defense. The feud between The Undertaker and Hulk Hogan was one of the most laughable in history, centered around the two men being super tough biker dudes, brother! To give them some credit, they did at least try on the night, but there just wasn't anything there. Hogan looked old and tired, and Taker wasn't exactly in his prime during his whole Big Evil phase either. The quality of the contest is summed up by Hogan taking two of the absolute worst chokeslams in history. The second one doing the job for the dead man after Vince McMahon interfered. WWE, sensing that Hogan was losing value by the match, took him out of the title picture and started using him to put over the likes of Kurt Angle, Brock Lesnar, and Edge as his tag team partner soon after. Number 3 versus Sid Justice at WrestleMania 8. In an ideal world, Hulk Hogan and Ric Flair would have headlined WrestleMania 8 in a dream match between the face of WWE and Mr. NWA/WCW. That was the original plan, but for whatever reason, somewhere along the line, plans changed. The upshot was Flair defended his WWE title against Randy Savage, and Hogan took on Sid Justice. The Nature Boy and the Macho Man had themselves a damn good match, as you would expect, while Hogan and Sid shambled their way through a shoddy shower of poo. I know it was a different time and the Hogan conquers the monster heel formula was a proven one, but this was bad. Almost totally dominated by the master and ruler of the world until the predictable Hogan comeback. Worse still, the match ended in a DQ, which is almost unforgivable for a Mania main event. The post-match scene with Papa Shango and the returning Ultimate Warrior is memorable, but not good enough to salvage the tedium that came before it. Number 2 versus The Warrior at Halloween Havoc 1998. Hogan and Warrior had a belter at WrestleMania 6, but Terry apparently wasn't all too pleased about passing the torch and doing such a high-profile job, with many speculating that a big reason for Jim Hellwig's brief but disastrous WCW run was just so he could get his win back. Their brief rekindling of the feud produced some of the worst ever WCW stuff, from Hogan seeing the ghost of Warrior in a mirror to the zany finish of the Fall Brawl War Games match. The action here, such as it was totally archaic and looked like something from at least a decade before. It was all tests of strength and running the ropes and chokes and clubs and timid slams and other assorted rubbish that was noticeably done at half speed. An encapsulation of the whole charade was the spot where Hogan tried to launch a fireball at his opponent, only for it to fail and end up blowing up in his own face instead. Now let me tell you something about visual metaphors, Mean Gene. A sad state of affairs, Hogan got his win back, but a million childhoods died a little on the night. Number 1, the Doomsday cage match at Uncensored 1996. The Alliance to end Hulkamania. Now why didn't I think of that? The alliance in question was comprised of Ric Flair, Arn Anderson, Lex Luger, Meng the Barbarian, Kevin Sullivan, Z-Gangster, Tiny Zeus Lister, and the regrettably named Ultimate Solution. This ragbag collection of heels tried to put an end to the red and yellow menace once and for all at Uncensored 1996 inside the Doomsday cage. The 8 of them had a tough task, going up against the 2 of Hogan and frenemy Randy Savage. Right, so Hogan and Savage had to start in the top cage against Flair and Anderson and fight their way down, encountering the other heels along the way. And, well, that was it, because the rules were never really properly explained. But who cares about rules and logic and the paying customer when the Hulkster's ego is what really matters? In short, it was dumb, overbooked, way too long, made no sense, and you couldn't even see half of it due to the way it was filmed. Of course, the baby faces triumphed, with a little help from the Booty Man and his deadly frying pans, with world champion Flair taking the deciding fall for no justifiable reason.